Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts, and today I'm going to show you why you don't ever need to buy another sketchbook. You're going to make your own. I'm going to do this by talking about how you can use a simple 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and then I'm going to demonstrate how you can make this and make this into a nice sketchbook that lies flat, by using this French link stitch. And I'm going to show how to do it without and with fabric tapes. So a little variation there. Today's video is going to be slow and repetitive. And that is because once you've got this French link stitch under your belt, you will be able to whip one of these up in no time and make a blank book that looks like you, that is the right weight, the right size, so that you can get working in your book. But to get that stitch under your belt, I think it's best when you're seeing it for the first time, if I go slowly and clearly and I repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And then as you get more comfortable with it, as you get more comfortable with that stitch, you are going to be off and running and making. So please join me. If you like journal arts, if you like book and paper arts, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be sure and turn on the notifications. It will really help my channel a lot if you do. Let's go make a blank book. In addition to being fun, easy, and inexpensive, one of the best things about making your own handmade blank book is you don't have to be afraid of it. Sometimes when we have a store-bought blank book or one that's been given to us as a gift, it's pristine and that can be intimidating. But these books I made in a deliberately messy style, and I can just hit the ground running without that being intimidated. This mini one, hand-sized, I made from scrap papers. They were left over from another project. It's just the right size for one journal entry a day. And I don't have to worry about whether that's good enough for my new pristine blank book. So think about that when you think about making a book for yourself. I made each of these books using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. That is where I've got one signature, in this case, one signature, and it's got a hole here and here and here. And you just here and here and here. And that's all. You have to just sew, blah, 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 tie a knot, and you are done. It's so easy, and it's really satisfying. It's also what I've used here. I'm not going to demonstrate the 3-hole stitch today because I have a video showing how I made this book and this book and this book. So 3 different how to do a 3-hole stitch videos. I'm going to link to those. The links are in the text box below this video. And if you haven't done this before, I cannot recommend it enough. It's a really easy, great go-to way to make a book. Instead, I'm going to spend the rest of the video demonstrating this French link stitch binding. It is really growing on me. And while the 3-hole or 5-hole pamphlet stitch is my go-to everyday stitch, I like this French link binding because your book is really going to lie flat. And that's good if you are working on this on the road. It also has a little bit of space here between the signatures where the stitching is, which means that as I add and clip in and glue in elements, the book can chunk right up. So this is a good option to have in your bookbinding toolbox. There are two versions I'm going to show today. One is just how to make the stitching, and the other is how to make the stitching and add fabric tapes. I prefer it with fabric tapes, but it is optional. And I thought that if I just started off without them, it's going to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing with the needle and thread. Let's go. It starts with paper. I have different kinds of pads of paper, cartridge paper that I use for making handmade books and art journals. This is a watercolor weight. It's the one that I tend to use for my own books. Kind of heavy, but it stands up to liquid media really well. This is a drawing weight. It's a little bit lighter. And the thing is, if you've got a pad like this, it lets you tear the pages to the size that you feel comfortable with for whatever project you're working on. They don't cost that much, especially considering the fact that you can get, like 10 journals out of one pad. But you do not have to have a fancy pad of paper. Use copier paper. Heck, if you're just getting started, use notebook paper and tear it to the size you like. You know what else would make a really good book? A brown paper bag. It's a nice weight. You don't have to tea dye your pages. They're already in a nice tan palette. So, use whatever paper you got. No excuses. Using whatever paper that you've ended up with, then you want to tear it or cut it to the size that for whatever project you want to use. This is that watercolor paper, and I could just fold it in half and make pages like this for a larger size sketchbook, a more conventional size sketchbook. I'm very fond, however, of this landscape format that's hand-sized. And I've just found that out by trial and error. So I can take my paper now and fold it in half and then tear it. And if I do it this way, I'm going to have landscape orientation. Or I could fold it this way and have pages that are in a portrait orientation. So you have to play around and see what works for your style and your project. You can, of course, cut your papers. I cannot be bothered. So I tear mine with a straight edge. It also gives you a nice little pseudo-deckled edge there. And you want to take some kind of straight edge and make sure you've got a very tight crease. This is called a folio. And when we put these together, we now have a signature. However many pages you want to put in a signature is up to your personal style. I've been making these with 4 pages. Makes 8. 4 papers makes 8 pages. 4 and 4 is 8. And that is 16 sides, front and back. 16 sides. So this is if I get 4 or 5 of these signatures, that's going to be a nice size book. Before you start sewing your signatures, you want to poke holes into where you're going to be sewing. And then you want to do that to all of your signatures. Where you put those holes is very much going to be determined by the size of the paper that you're using and whether you want to use how many links you want to have. I am pretty happy with 2, 1, 2, but today I'm going to show 3, 1, 2, 3, and you could use as many or as few, as many as you want. Let's see. In this particular one, I've gone with, you need a top and a bottom, 1 and 1. And I've made these 1/2 inch from either side. You don't want them to be too far up. Too far down. So 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch-ish. Then you're going to need 2 holes for each link stitch. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I do not usually draw on the signature. I just did that to help you see it. Instead, I use a piece of cardboard as a scrap piece of paper, and then I put my holes there. I also put an X here to make sure I know which way is going up. It should be symmetrical, but stuff happens. To make your holes, you need something sharp and pointy. I'm using an awl, a bookmaker's awl, but you can also, if you don't have one, you could use a thumbtack. Just twist that on in there. I also have this oversized needle that I use for leather work, and sometimes if I can't find my awl, and that happens, heaven knows, I can use this instead. Improvise. Before you start putting in your holes and sewing, crease all your papers and then crease them again, because it's really important to have these as sharp and tight as you can, and then make sure they're nestled really tight. Because you're poking holes in things, make sure that you protect your work surface. I'm using an old dictionary. Back when I started out bookbinding, we used phone books. Remember those? Maybe not. You could also use an encyclopedia or 2 stacked on top of each other, but protect your workspace. So I've got my X up at the top here, and that's all nice and snug. And now I'm just going to go all the way through all the pages. And as I said, you could use a push pin. Now I have my holes. And I'm going to go back through on the other side and just, since I'm going to be working from the outside, and I'm going to poke, make sure that hole is nice and clean and clear. Just going on that line. We're ready. I have my signatures and they have their holes. I'm using 5. I sometimes go with as few as 3, and I've seen some made with a ton, especially if you like the decorative look there. But for me, 5, 4 pages per signature, 8 papers, and that's 16 sides times 5. That's going to give me 80 pages front and back. And that's plenty for me for one book. So to get your threads ready, I'm using a cotton thread. Linen is, if you have a thin linen thread, embroidery thread works really well. So if you can get something like that. In a pinch, you could use dental floss. Dental floss, what is that except wax thread? So I'm going to go with 1 length per signature. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more because you just do one more. Gives you a little space. I am going to wax this cotton thread. I have a hunk of beeswax that I got at the farmer's market. You do not have to wax your thread. This is optional. But it will help you control the thread. It's going to be a little bit more stiff and easy to work with. So again, you can skip this part. Or, back in the day, I used to use a candle stub, and it worked just fine. It's just one day at the farmer's market, this guy had some cute wax stick thingies. So I've pulled my thread through the wax several times, and it's going to be easier to work with. Now to start sewing. And before I do, here comes a pep talk. This may look fiddly, but once you've done it imperfectly the first time, and then better the second time, and better still the third time, you will be able to knock these off in a few minutes, I promise. So just stick with me for the first imperfect time. For the first signature, you're just going to go start at the top, and you're just going to feed in and out and in and out. Not doing any linking at this point. Leave a little bit of a tail there. You're going to need that in a minute. Go in and out of your holes. And as you go, make sure that you pull nice and tight. You do not want this to be slack. However, this is important. When you pull, to make sure it's no slack there, don't pull upside or downside. If you do, you could very well tear the threads through the paper. I know, I found out the hard way. Instead, pull up, and that's still going to make that feed through there and take away any slack. Hey presto, you've started. Now take your second signature and hold it as tightly as you can to the first one. I've got that opened up to the center there. On each of my signatures, I have added a very light pencil mark. And that way I can make sure that when I pull these up and add them, that they're all going in the right direction. Now you've come out with your stitching out of the bottom hole, and we're going to go back in through the bottom hole of the second signature. And that's how it's going to start holding your book together. Make sure it's nice and tight. Go into the second hole. Now, we're going to make our first link, and all you want to do is go under the thread to make a stitch. And the hardest part of this that you need to remember is that you want to sew in the direction of your new signature. So I'm just going to stitch under there in the direction of the new signature, and then just that one link, and then back in through the hole. And make sure it's nice and tight. Back through the hole, under the thread from the first signature in the direction of your new one. and then back in to your hole. Nice and tight. Back through, under, in the direction of the new signature, in the hole. And really, really, really make sure these are tight. Then out through the top hole of your new signature. At this point, I'm going to take this tail from the first one and make a knot. I'm going to do it a couple of times. And that's where that's going to hold together. You know what? I'm an anxious sort of person, and I'm going to do that a third time. Then trim. Now we're going to go back to sewing. Take your third signature and open it up and hold it as tightly as you can to the text block that you've just started. You came out through the top hole, go in through the top hole. And pull it nice and tight. Go back in. And now again, this is going to be a little bit different on you're starting the French link. You see you've got like an X. X, 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 X. This is not difficult, I promise. You want to pick the part of the X that is closest to the hole of your new signature. That's all. You don't want to go here or here or here because that's going backwards. The only way forward is under the thread, the stitch that you've already made in the direction of your new signature. Seriously, this will be easy once you've done it a few times. I am not even going to kid. I had to watch this step about in slow motion. I just stopped my camera and stopped my video and started it again a few times until I could see what was going on. And then when I got it, I got it. So don't be afraid to just watch this a few times. All you need to do is look at your X and send your needle underneath. You're making a stitch in the direction of the hole of your new signature, which is right here, and then back in. Make sure these are tight. I'm going to feed my thread a little bit so that I don't double up too much. Go back through. We have one last link. Got your X. You're going to go under in the direction next to the hole of your new signature. And pull tight. Now come back out. And you're going to make a little stitch here, pulling these together. This is called a kettle stitch. You've got a teeny tiny stitch here between signatures 1 and 2. Send your needle through in the direction of your sewing. And there you go. There's your kettle stitch attaching the bottom part. And I'm going to go ahead and then send the stitch through signatures 2 and 3 in the direction where I'm going. You don't have to make a knot. To finish off the kettle stitch, this is my last signature, so we're going to finish off here and make a knot. Go under the stitch, and now you've got this loop. Sew into the loop and pull it really nice and tight, and you've got your knot. Do that again. Go under the stitch in the direction that you're sewing in, and before you pull it tight, you've got a little, go in through the hole and pull it nice and tight. Yeah, I am going to do it again because I can. And now I'm going to trim that off. And that's it. It's done. We don't need that anymore. Before we move on, I just want to say that I have seen examples of these with many signatures, and this link stitch is perfect and gorgeous. It's decorative and it's integral to the look of the book. This is not that book for me. For me, this is a book that I can take and put in my bag and use, and it's going to get banged up. So please do not worry if your stitches are wonky and not balanced and symmetrical and perfect. If they hold your book together, you're doing good. Before we move on, I want to let you know that this French link stitch can sometimes give you a little wobble. If you are a longtime professional bookbinder, you may not find this. You may find that yours are perfect and really tight. But I've talked to some part-time bookmakers and hobbyist bookmakers, and I have found that it is just not unusual at all for there to be some wobble there. That's okay. I'm only pointing out to tell you that that is okay. Your book's still going to hold together. You can do a lot with it. Just make sure that you are pulling your stitches as tight as you can, and your book will get tighter. But don't fret if it's not as firmly bound as some other stitch might give you. One thing that can help make your text block a little more sturdy is to add fabric strips here into the link. These, I have made my fabric tapes. In this one, I used some burlap ribbon I bought on eBay, and then I cut it in half when I decided how long I wanted my stitches to be. For this one, I'm working on applique jeans. It's my hobby right now, and I got this fabric, this William Morris fabric at my local fabric store. And again, I just cut it to what I wanted. I felt what was right for the book and made some homemade fabric tape. For this next art journal that I'm going to bind using the French link stitch with some handmade fabric tapes, I've used, I had an old pillowcase, nice tightly woven cotton that it just bit the dust. So I tore it into ribbons and then tea-dyed them. Now I've got my first signature, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I've just woven in and out and in and out and in. Just weaving in and out of the holes that you've punched. And making sure that everything is pulled nice and tight. Now, not too tight, because you're going to stop at this point, and the difference is you're going to start feeding in your fabric tape, your cloth tape. Let's see. This is going to be the front, and this is going to be the back, so you're going to need a little extra tape to cover all of these extra guys. So give this a little more here. Feed that in. Okay, now go back and tighten everything again at this point. Yeah, so just make sure that once you've fed the tape in, that you're making sure it's nice and tight. And it is. So we're going to go back, as we did in the first, and we're going to pick up our second signature. let's see, open it up so that you're holding it in the middle. Came out through the bottom on the first signature, so we're going to go in through the bottom on the second signature. Okay, I'm holding those close together again as I pull tight. Now I'm going to go back into the hole on this second signature. And make sure that tape is pulled down. Make sure you don't sew into the fabric, because then you won't have as much give. Now, because we're going to start sewing these together, you're going to go under in the direction of the hole of the next hole in the next signature and pull tight. Go in. And pull tight. Go back through that hole. See, it's a little harder to see. You're doing the exact same stitch. It's just that you're going around. Oops. Yikes. Around the strip of fabric. Underneath, you're going to make a link under that thread, going in the direction of the next hole. And in. Oops, doesn't want to go in. And then back through the top. Make sure everything is very, very tight. And tie a knot between the first threads here. You came out through the bottom hole, the top hole, sorry. Going to go back in through the top hole on that third signature. You know what? Let's trim that off. That's the extra from the first one. Okay. Now, we've gone in through the top hole of the third signature. Out. Just weaving, weaving, weaving. Pulling tight. Pull your tape down. And here's where you're going to create the French link. Not here, because that's not the direction of the sewing. Not here, because that's going to the old signature. But here, under this thread, because that's in the direction of the hole of the next signature. I keep saying that because that was the hardest part for me to grasp. And when I did, it seemed so simple. So I'm saying it a lot. And then it'll seem simple. Because it is. You're just making a stitch. Pull tight. Go back in. Pull the tape down, the fabric. And then go through the one thread. You're going to make that link. Being careful not to sew the fabric. Nice and tight. And in. And then out through the bottom hole. There's a tiny stitch between the first and second signature. Go under those in the direction that you're sewing, and you've made a kettle stitch. And then I'm going to go underneath the stitch in the second and the third signature and make another kettle stitch. To add the final signature, came out through the bottom, go in through the bottom, tight, 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 feed it through the next hole, pull the tape down nice and flat, go under the stitch, the thread, it's closest to the next hole, which is here. So you can see why I didn't start demonstrating with the tapes. They're fine, they're just fiddly, and they are getting in the way of showing what the stitch would look like. But you're using the same stitch. You're just working in and out and around the fabric. And through the last hole. Fabric, fabric, and then in the direction that you're going in, add that kettle stitch, and then add a kettle stitch between your last two. And this time catch that circle, that loop, and pull it tight. Do it again. Underneath the stitch, in the direction you're going, catch the loop. And you're done. Now I'm going to glue the tapes down to my either side of the front and back. I'm using a gel medium, but you could use a white craft glue or even a glue stick. And you can't paint the paper, but I'm going to go ahead and paint this. The tabs. Make sure I've got enough there on the corner so that it goes round and stays there. Yeah, it's a little messy. Now go ahead and pull it nice and tight. And that's going to give you a little extra tightness. And then just glue it on all the other sides, front and back. You can, of course, leave the tapes exposed, showing. But in this particular book, I'm going to cover them up. And I'm going to add, what I'm going to do is glue on this echo print that I made from Autumn Leaves that I picked here in a park in Wales. If you would like to know how to make your own echo prints with autumn leaves, I have a video tutorial here on YouTube, and I will link to that and put the link in the text box so that you can see how to make your own autumn leaf echo prints. They are so cool. Now I am going to trim this, and I'm just going to glue it to the front cover and the back cover, and I'm going to leave the spine exposed with the contrasting thread and fabric ribbon. One of the reasons why you may never go back to buying a store-bought sketchbook or blank book after learning to make your own is that you can make them look like you right from the get-go. This is the one where I'm just going to leave these fabric tapes showing, and now I have a coverless journal. I've added a lot of ink splatters, and I've even added some ink drizzles on the inside to make the pages even less intimidating, a little more warm, and I can just get started working in this book. This one that I made from scrap papers, I want to turn this one into a journal for drawing birds. Did I say that already? So I just took some text from a book and made a half cover. Just pulled it round and glued it down. And then I've had a stencil with some flying birds. And I used an ink pad and I added some stencils there. And this one, it's still a coverless journal, but I've covered the front page and I'm going to do the back with acrylic paint, gesso, and another stencil. So you can just make these look so many fun different ways. Here's the one I just sewed. I could add some collage to it. I could do that and then add some walnut ink drizzles, and that would be so cool. This is another reason why these would also make a really good gift, because they're budget friendly, but it's also going to be a one-of-a-kind handmade thing that you have made for someone else, and that's the best kind of gift there is. And here's a last look at the one that I just sewed, and with the echo print cover, the exposed binding, and the back. Now, I want to show you the inside of this book. It's what I call a boiled book. And that is because I made this by adding onion skins and rust, and then boiling my papers in a tea bath. I teach how to make your own boiled book in an online class that I have available, and I'm going to, if you'd like to learn how to make your own boiled book and pages, you know where to find the link. There we go. I hope that you will give this a try. And that means putting in the time to rewatch the parts with the fiddly looking stitching, which is really not at all. Rewatch that as many times as you need to. Then make your first imperfect book and maybe a second one. And then you're going to get it. You're going to start to get it. You won't have to consult any other videos or whatnot. And you'll be able to make a book like this in under half an hour, less, 20 minutes. You will get the bug. If you have Any feedback or any questions, please let me know in the comments below, and we will see what we can see and learn. Until next time, get up and go make something.